Omaima Ari Nelson was born and raised in Cairo, Egypt in 1968. In 1986, she immigrated to the United States following her marriage to an American citizen named Roger Stainbrook, whom she divorced. She lived primarily in California, working as a student nanny and later also getting a job as a model at South Coast Plaza. She would often engage in simultaneous relationships with different men and frequented bars to solicit older men for sex under the names Ishta or Nadia. In October 1991, at the age of 23, she met William Edwin Nelson while playing pool at a bar. Nelson was 56-year-old at the time, worked as a pilot in Laredo, Texas, and lived in Costa Mesa as a computer programmer, having been released the same year after serving 4 years in prison for attempting to smuggle 100 tons of marijuana from Mexico through his job. Nelson proposed to her 2 days later. On November 28, 1991, Omaima claimed Bill had essayed her in their apartment on Eldon Street after she had been tied to a bed during bondage play. Omaima said she broke free of her restraints and hit Bill with a lamp before stabbing him with scissors and beating him with a cloth iron. He was determined to have died of several stab wounds. After killing him, she began dismembering his body and cooked his head and boiled his hands to remove his fingerprints. She then mixed up his body parts with leftover turkey and disposed of him in a garbage disposal. Neighbors claim they heard the disposal unit running for hours after the time of Bill's death. She reportedly castrated him in revenge for his alleged essay. She told her psychiatrist that she had cooked her husband's ribs in barbecue sauce and eaten them, but has since consistently denied this. Scheffner later claimed that the 12-hour dismemberment was performed in a trance-like state, and that her behavior was the result of a psychotic episode. Afterwards, she drove through Orange County in Nelson's car, hoping to convince former boyfriends to help in the disposal of Nelson's body, but he refused to listen to her story and told her to leave. Gray alerted the authorities, who searched the Nelson residence to discover much of the furniture stained with blood and human flesh. The rooms were either wrapped in tinfoil or packed into plastic bags or cardboard boxes. In total, police found 11 containers in the house, as well as a garbage bag in the car, all stuffed with Nelson's remains. Officers also recovered a large soup pot, used to cook some of the body parts, a cooler that contained Nelson's severed head, a deep fat fryer containing 2 hands, and a glass jar with contents of undisclosed nature. Though Nelson stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed approximately 230 pounds, police estimated they had found only 100 pounds of human remains. This number was eventually revised to 150 pounds by the coroner's office, but the remaining 80 pounds of body mass, which including Nelson's genitals, were left unaccounted for. A few hours later, in the early morning of December 2nd, Omaima went to 27-year-old Jose Esquivel and told him that her husband had essayed her, showing him cuts on her chest, thighs, and feet, as well as ligature markings on her wrists as proof. She then asked him to help in the disposal of Nelson's body, including his entrails and denture, which she had brought to his doorstep in a garbage bag. In exchange, she offered him several appliances and the false promise of $75,000 from a safe that really only contained $100. Esquivel told her he accepted and excused himself to get his truck, but instead called the police. The trial began in 1993, and the case became a media circus. The public couldn't look away from the gruesome details and Omaima's unervingly composed demeanor. She was portrayed as a black widow, a woman who lured men in only to destroy them. The defense argued she was a battered woman who acted in self-defense, but the jury didn't buy it. The evidence was overwhelming, and Omaima was convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. Macy Marie Lathers, a 24-year-old social media model, was arrested in August 2024 following a horrific car crash in downtown Miami that resulted in the deaths of 2 people and injuries to a third. The incident occurred on August 10th, 2024, at the intersection of North Miami Avenue and North 8th Street. According to police and court records, Lathers was driving a white Mercedes sedan at an excessive speed, reportedly reaching nearly 80 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone, with her foot on the accelerator at 100% acceleration when she ran a red light. Her vehicle slammed into a black Range Rover, which then collided with a silver Suzuki. The crash killed Abraham Molina, the driver of the Suzuki, and Jesus Rubio, a passenger in the Suzuki. Molina's fiancée, Juanita Hernandez, who was also in the Suzuki, suffered injuries. Immediately after the crash, Lathers allegedly attempted to flee the scene without rendering aid or calling 911, but was reportedly confronted and held back by bystanders. Police body cam footage from the scene showed Lathers on the ground, disoriented, screaming, and vomiting. She reportedly told officers she was under the influence of Tussie, also known as pink coke, a party typically made from ketamine and other substances, and made bizarre statements, including claiming to be from the future and having a crystal ball. Toxicology reports later confirmed a variety of in her system, though no alcohol. Lathers was driving with a suspended license, which had been indefinitely suspended since January 2024. She was initially granted house arrest after posting bond, but prosecutors later filed 2 DUI manslaughter charges, leading to her being sent back to jail without bond. She faces a total of 10 felony charges, including multiple counts of vehicular homicide, reckless driving, driving with a suspended license causing death or injury, and leaving the scene of a crash causing death or serious injury. Macy Marie Lathers has pleaded not guilty to the charges and remains jailed without bond while awaiting trial. The judge in the case has called her an absolute danger to the community. The families of the victims have expressed their profound grief and called for justice. On the night of July 6, 2012, Shalia Eddie and Rachel Shoaf enacted a horrific plan. Driven by a toxic secret and a chilling disdain for their friend, they prepared for murder, stashing cleaning supplies and knives in their car. Just after midnight, Skylar Neese innocently slipped out of her window to join them. They drove to a secluded spot in Brave, Pennsylvania. Feigning casual conversation, they used a forgotten lighter as a cue. As Skylar turned, they attacked her, stabbing her repeatedly. The struggle was frantic, with Skylar even wounding Rachel, but Shalia continued until Skylar was silent. In the immediate aftermath, they tried to bury her body, but the rocky ground prevented it. They resorted to covering her with branches and leaves, discarding their clothes and meticulously cleaning themselves and the car. Rachel later revealed their motive. They simply didn't like her anymore and didn't want to be friends, with rumors of their own romantic relationship, which Skylar knew about, suggesting a fear of exposure. For months, Shalia and Rachel maintained a deception, comforting Skylar's grieving parents and distributing missing person flyers. The breakthrough came in January 2013 when Rachel Shoaf confessed to authorities after a mental breakdown. She led investigators to Skylar's body in Wayne Township, Greene County, Pennsylvania, on January 16, 2013. With Rachel's confession and the body found, the evidence against Shalia Eddie became insurmountable, leading to her indictment on September 6, 2013. On May 1, 2013, Rachel Shoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, receiving a 30-year sentence with parole eligibility after 10 years. She expressed remorse, though her parole requests have since been denied. In stark contrast, Shalia Eddie pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on January 24, 2014. She received a life sentence with parole eligibility after 15 years, with mercy slated for her first hearing in 2028. Shalia notably expressed no remorse. She claimed self-defense, stating her victims, all male clients she picked up as a worker, had attempted to rape or rape her. Her early life was tumultuous, marked by abandonment, alleged molestation, and a history of arrests. Wuornos' killing spree began in November 1989 with Richard Mallory, leading to the deaths of 6 more men over the next year, all shot with a .22 caliber pistol. She was apprehended in January 1991 after being linked to stolen items, and her girlfriend cooperated with police. Wuornos confessed to the killings, though maintaining her self-defense claims. In January 1992, she was convicted of Richard Mallory's murder and sentenced to death, accumulating 6 death sentences in total. Over a decade on death row, her mental state deteriorated, and she eventually chose to end her appeals, expressing a desire for execution. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos spent her final hours on death row at Florida State Prison in Stark. She declined a special last meal, opting instead for just a single cup of black coffee, which she drank approximately 9 hours before her execution. As the time for her execution drew near, she was moved to the execution chamber and strapped to the gurney. In those final moments, Wuornos delivered her widely reported last words. "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back, I'll be back." She was executed by lethal injection at 9:47 a.m. She was pronounced dead moments after the injection began. Amber Hillberling. Amber Hillberling was 19 years old and full of life when she married Joshua Hillberling, a handsome Air Force veteran. The two seemed to have it all: youth, good looks, and a whirlwind romance that led to marriage. But behind closed doors, their relationship was volatile, marked by passionate highs and destructive lows. On June 7, 2011, everything came to a devastating end. In a luxury apartment on the 25th floor of a Tulsa, Oklahoma high-rise, Amber and Josh got into a heated argument. The fight turned physical, and moments later, Josh fell through their apartment's glass window and plummeted to his death. He landed on a parking garage roof below, shattering not just glass but the lives of everyone involved. Amber immediately called 911, her voice trembling as she described what had happened. She admitted to pushing Josh during the fight, but she insisted it wasn't intentional. According to Amber, it was an accident, a moment of anger and impulsiveness that spiraled into tragedy. The crime scene was harrowing. Shards of broken glass littered the apartment floor, and witnesses in the building described hearing the terrifying sound of glass breaking and Josh's fall. Investigators quickly arrested Amber, and soon the young widow found herself in the middle of a high-profile legal battle. The media descended on the case, painting Amber as either a tragic young woman or a dangerous, hot-headed killer. Social media buzzed with speculation. Some believed her story of a horrible accident, citing her young age and claims of an abusive marriage. Others saw her as reckless and unable to control her temper, pointing to her admission of shoving Josh during their argument. At her trial in 2013, the prosecution argued that Amber acted out of anger and malice. They presented evidence of their turbulent marriage, including reports of previous arguments and physical altercations. They claimed Amber had a history of lashing out and suggested she knew the risks when she shoved Josh near the window. Amber's defense painted a different picture. They claimed she was a victim of domestic abuse, pushed to her breaking point by Josh's controlling and violent behavior. Amber herself took the stand, tearfully recounting the moments leading up to the fatal push. She maintained it was never her intention to harm Josh, and her legal team argued that the apartment's faulty, thin glass was partly to blame for the tragedy. The jury didn't buy her defense. Amber was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Amber's story didn't end there. While in prison, she spoke out in interviews, describing her struggles and maintaining that she never meant to hurt Josh. She also discussed her pain over losing him and the life they had dreamed of building together. But on October 24th, 2016, tragedy struck again. Amber was found dead in her prison cell, hanging from a bedsheet. Her death was ruled a suicide. Mahek Bukari. On February 11th, 2022, a high-speed car chase on the A46 in Leicester ended in absolute tragedy. A silver Skoda went off the road, crashed, and caught fire, killing two young men inside, Saqib Hussain and Hashim Ijazuddin, both in their early 20s. At first, it seemed like a horrible accident, but investigators soon uncovered a much darker story. It turned out that Mahek Bukari, a 23-year-old TikTok influencer, and her mom, Ansareen, were at the center of it all. There was a messy mix of a secret affair, blackmail, and trying to save their reputation at all costs. Mahek was all about showing off her glamorous life on TikTok. She posted videos of her outfits, makeup, and fancy lifestyle, building up thousands of followers. But behind the scenes, things were far from picture perfect. Ansareen, Mahek's mom, had been having an affair with Saqib Hussain, a much younger man. When she decided to break things off, Saqib didn't take it well. He started threatening to leak explicit photos and videos of her unless she paid him £3,000. Panicking, Ansareen told Mahek everything, and together they came up with a plan to meet Saqib and deal with it. That night, Saqib and his friend Hashim agreed to meet Mahek and Ansareen in a Tesco parking lot in Leicester. But when they arrived, it wasn't just Mahek and her mom waiting. They brought backup, 2 cars full of people with a completely different plan. Saqib and Hashim quickly realized something was wrong and sped off in their Skoda. What followed was a terrifying car chase down the A46, with Mahek's group chasing them at over 90 miles per hour. It ended in disaster when the Skoda was rammed off the road, crashed, and went up in flames. Both Saqib and Hashim died on the spot. Before the crash, Saqib made a heart-wrenching call to police. He was begging for help, saying they were being rammed off the road and feared for their lives. The call ended suddenly as the crash happened. Investigators dug into CCTV footage, phone records, and witness accounts, and it all pointed to one thing. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate act to stop Saqib from exposing Ansareen and ruining their family's reputation. During the trial in 2023, prosecutors said Mahek was desperate to protect her mom and her social media image. Her whole life revolved around looking perfect online, and this scandal was something she couldn't let happen. Mahek claimed they never meant to hurt anyone. They just wanted to get back the explicit content. But the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, Mahek and Ansarine were found guilty of murder. Mahek was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 31 years, and her mom got 26 years. Several others involved in the chase also got long prison sentences. Shaina Hubers. It was a love story that took a dark and deadly turn. Shaina Hubers was a bright and ambitious college graduate with a sharp mind and a passion for academics. At 19, she met Ryan Poston, a 28-year-old attorney from a prominent family in Kentucky. Ryan was handsome, successful, and charming, everything Shaina dreamed of. Their relationship began in 2011, and for a time, it seemed perfect. But beneath the surface, cracks quickly began to form. Ryan wasn't as invested in the relationship as Shaina. He saw their connection as casual, but Shaina became deeply attached. Their on-again, off-again romance was marked by constant fights, breakups, and reconciliation. Ryan tried to pull away, but Shaina wouldn't let him go. She bombarded him with texts and calls, often showing up uninvited at his apartment. By October 2012, Ryan was ready to move on. He had even planned a date with Miss Ohio, a woman he'd recently met online. But Shaina wasn't about to let him slip away. On the evening of October 12, 2012, Shaina went to Ryan's apartment, and the night ended in a way no one could have imagined. At 8:53 p.m., Shaina called 911. Her voice was calm, almost detached, as she confessed, "I just killed my boyfriend." She claimed Ryan had been abusive and that she had in self-defense during a heated argument. The crime scene told a different story. Ryan was found slumped over his dining room table 6 times. One of the shots had been fired into his face, while others hit him in the chest and arms. The excessive nature of the shooting raised immediate suspicions. During her initial police interview, Shaina's behavior shocked investigators. She laughed, smiled, and even joked about the shooting. At one point, she commented, "I gave him the nose job he wanted," referring to the gunshot to Ryan's face. Her demeanor was chilling, eerily casual for someone who had just killed her boyfriend. The case quickly became a media sensation. Shaina's bizarre behavior in police custody and her claims of self-defense captivated the public. Prosecutors argued that Shaina was a jealous and obsessive girlfriend who killed Ryan in a fit of rage after he tried to end their relationship for good. They presented text messages and emails showing her relentless attempts to keep Ryan in her life, despite his clear desire to move on. The defense maintained that Shaina was a victim of domestic abuse, claiming she acted out of fear for her life. They described Ryan as controlling and emotionally abusive, though no evidence of physical abuse ever presented. In 2015, Shaina Hubers was convicted of murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. However, the conviction was overturned after it was revealed that one of the jurors was a convicted felon, which violated Kentucky law. In 2018, Shaina was retried, and the outcome was the same. The jury found her guilty of murder, and this time, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Courtney Clinty, also known online as Courtney Taylor, is an OnlyFans and Instagram model who is facing a second-degree murder charge in connection with the April 2022 stabbing death of her boyfriend, Christian Abumsali. Their relationship was marked by a pattern of domestic disputes. While living in South Austin, Texas, neighbors reported frequent shouting and violent altercations. Police were reportedly called to their Austin residence multiple times due to these disturbances. The volatile nature of their interactions continued after their move to a luxury condominium in Miami. Building security and staff documented numerous instances of loud arguments, and other tenants complained about the noise, leading to the building reportedly preparing to evict them. In July 2021, Clinty was arrested in Las Vegas for domestic battery on Abumsali in their hotel. Surveillance footage from February 2022 in their Miami building shows Clinty repeatedly striking Abumsali in an elevator, with him attempting to push her away. Another video, taken in Aspen, Colorado in 2022, depicts Clinty physically and verbally attacking Abumsali, accusing him of flirting. Evidence presented by prosecutors includes text messages and recordings from Abumsali's iCloud, which allegedly detail the abuse he suffered. In 2021, he claimed he was stabbed in the leg very badly and hit his head so hard he might have suffered a concussion. The day of the fatal stabbing, April 3, 2022, initially appeared calm, with the couple reportedly playing with their dogs. However, an argument escalated after Abumsali returned from getting food. Clinty was on the phone with her mother, who reportedly heard her yell and accuse Abumsali of lying. Shortly after, at 4:57 p.m., Clinty called 911, reporting that Abumsali had been stabbed. On the call, he can be heard saying he was dying. Clinty admitted to police that she caused the 3-inch stab wound to Abumsali's chest, but claimed she acted in self-defense, stating he had pushed and thrown her to the floor. leading her to throw a knife at him from about 10 feet away. However, the medical examiner's report on the downward angle of Abumsali's wound contradicts her account of throwing the knife from a distance. Police also noted no visible injuries on her. Clinty was arrested in Hawaii in August 2022 and has been held without bond since. She has pleaded not guilty. Her case has seen numerous delays and legal battles, particularly concerning evidence and attorney-client privilege. Prosecutors have filed charges against Clinty and her parents for allegedly accessing Abumsali's laptop after his death. These charges were later dropped after a judge ruled that prosecutors had improperly gathered evidence and violated attorney-client privilege. Clinty's defense team has been actively trying to get the entire Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office disqualified from the case, alleging that prosecutors accessed privileged communications. The lead prosecutor on the case has already withdrawn. Her attorneys have also sought to have her released on bond. For Isabella Guzman, a troubled relationship with her mother drove her to commit an unthinkable act. Investigators revealed that Isabella had shown increasing hostility toward her mother, Yunmi Hoy, in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. A heated argument and a series of alarming behaviors foreshadowed the brutal attack that would forever change their family. The tragic series of events began on the evening of August 28, 2013 at the Guzman family home in Aurora, Colorado. That night, 18-year-old Isabella confronted her 47-year-old mother in a fit of rage. Earlier in the day, Isabella's stepfather, Ryan Hoy, had witnessed her shouting and slamming doors during a heated argument. Yunmi, desperate to de-escalate the situation, reportedly emailed her pastor seeking guidance and help. That evening, tensions boiled over. Isabella stormed into the upstairs bathroom where her mother was, locking the door behind her. Armed with a knife, Isabella launched a frenzied attack, stabbing Yunmi 79 times in a fit of uncontrollable rage. The brutality of the assault left investigators and the community in shock. Ryan Hoy, who was downstairs during the attack, heard screams and rushed to the door, but it was too late. He managed to force the door open, only to discover Yunmi's lifeless body and Isabella fleeing the scene. By the time authorities arrived, Isabella had disappeared, sparking a manhunt. Isabella was later found at a nearby residence and taken into custody. During her court appearances, Isabella's behavior stunned the public. Her cold and distant demeanor, coupled with her unsettling smirks and piercing stares, became the focus of widespread media attention. At one point, she looked directly into the courtroom cameras and flashed a chilling smile, a gesture that left many questioning her mental state and remorse. Her defense team argued that Isabella had been suffering from untreated mental illness and was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the attack. Ultimately, the court found her not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was committed to a state mental hospital, where she remains to this day. Years later, Isabella unexpectedly became the subject of viral TikTok videos. Footage from her court appearances, especially her eerie smirks and defiant looks, began circulating on the platform. Millions of users viewed and shared these clips, with some turning her into a bizarre internet fascination. Taylor Shabus, a 24-year-old woman with a troubled past, was at the center of it all. She was known in her circle for her wild behavior and a history of drug use, but no one could have predicted the gruesome events that would unfold on the night of February 23rd. That evening, Taylor was with Shad Therian, a 24-year-old man described by friends and family as kind and gentle. The two had been in an on-again, off-again relationship and shared a history of substance use. According to reports, the pair had been using methamphetamine together in Shad's mother's home before their night took a violent turn. At some point during the evening, Taylor and Shad began engaging in sexual acts that involved choking, a practice they had reportedly explored before. But this time, Taylor didn't stop. She later claimed she became carried away and strangled Shad with a chain, ultimately ending his life. Rather than call for help or alert authorities, Taylor dismembered Shad's body. Using a bread knife and other tools found in the home, she separated his limbs and placed body parts into various bags and containers. The scene was beyond comprehension, brutal, calculated, and grotesque. The next day, Shad's mother made the horrifying discovery. Returning home, she found a bucket in the basement containing her son's severed head, covered with a towel. She immediately called the police, who arrived to uncover the rest of the crime scene. Investigators found blood throughout the house, along with additional body parts in bags and storage containers. Taylor Shabus was quickly arrested. When police located her, she was covered in blood, and a search of her vehicle revealed additional evidence tying her to the crime. During questioning, her behavior stunned investigators. She admitted to the murder and dismemberment in chilling detail, showing no signs of remorse. She described how she had planned to take all the body parts with her but became lazy and left some behind. Taylor's explanation for her actions was as shocking as the crime itself. She told authorities she had no real reason for killing Shad, claiming she acted on impulse and had been fueled by her cold and detached demeanor throughout the investigation left many wondering how someone could commit such a brutal act without a shred of remorse. The case quickly gained national attention, with headlines highlighting the gruesome details and Taylor's bizarre courtroom behavior. At her initial court appearances, she smiled, laughed, and seemed unfazed by the gravity of her actions. At one point, she even attacked her attorney in court, further cementing the public's perception of her as erratic and dangerous. Taylor was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and third-degree. In July 2023, after months of legal proceedings, Taylor Shabus was convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Conrad Roy III was an 18-year-old from Massachusetts who appeared to have a promising future. Born on September 12, 1995, he was an intelligent young man who excelled in school, graduating at the top of his class. Conrad was also an athlete, actively participating in baseball and track. While helping out at his family's marine salvage business, he also worked hard to earn his captain's license, completing night classes to achieve this goal. However, beneath his accomplishments, Conrad grappled with serious mental health struggles, including social anxiety and depression. Despite receiving therapy throughout his adolescence, he found little relief. At 17, he attempted suicide for the first time by overdosing on paracetamol. In a moment of despair, he informed an online acquaintance about his actions, prompting her to contact authorities. This intervention led to his hospitalization and ultimately saved his life. In 2014, Conrad began recording video diaries in which he openly discussed his battles with mental illness. He expressed feelings of isolation and discomfort in social situations, struggling to understand why others expected him to be happy when he simply didn't feel that way. Around this time, he was deeply involved in an online relationship with Michelle Carter, a girl he had met in Florida 2 years prior while both were visiting relatives. Though they lived only an hour apart in Massachusetts, their relationship remained largely digital, with only a few in-person meetings. Michelle, a year younger than Conrad, had her own struggles, including eating disorders and depression. Like him, she had been in therapy and on medication for years. Despite her personal challenges, Michelle was seen by her classmates as kind and uplifting. For years, she had been a source of support for Conrad, encouraging him to seek help and even threatening to alert someone when he spoke of suicide. Their conversations often revolved around Conrad's suicidal thoughts. He shared his extensive research on methods to end his life and even suggested they die together, an idea Michelle initially dismissed. However, as time passed, her approach changed drastically. In the summer of 2014, Conrad's family believed he was improving. He spent time with loved ones, including a beach trip with his mother and sisters on July 12th, during which he seemed in good spirits. Yet later that evening, he left home, claiming he was visiting a friend. Tragically, he never returned. The following morning, Conrad's absence raised immediate concern. His mother reported him missing, and soon, police discovered his truck parked at a Kmart. Inside, they found his lifeless body. He had succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning using a water pump. Side notes were later found in his room, including one addressed to Michelle, thanking her for being there for him. His grieving family, initially unaware of her, found solace in believing she had supported him during his struggles. In the aftermath, Michelle reached out to Conrad's family, offering condolences and forming connections with them. She attended his wake and funeral, frequently contacted his mother and sister, and even proposed a visit to his bedroom to collect some of his belongings. She also asked for some of his ashes, which unsettled the family. Without their involvement, she organized a charity baseball event in his honor and presented herself as an advocate against suicide. On social media, she openly discussed her pain over failing to save Conrad and her desire to prevent similar tragedies. Initially, authorities ruled Conrad's death as with no external influence. However, a detective reviewing his phone records uncovered disturbing evidence. Michelle had actively encouraged him to go through with his plans. Her texts revealed relentless pressure, urging him to follow through even when he hesitated. Messages such as, "I don't get why you don't just do it," and "You keep putting it off," painted a shocking picture. When Conrad expressed guilt about how his family would feel, Michelle assured him that they would move on with time. She even instructed him to use carbon monoxide, reassuring him it was painless. A critical moment in the case was revealed when Michelle texted a friend, confessing, "It's my fault. I was on the phone with him when he got out of the car because he was scared. I told him to get back in." This admission proved instrumental in the charges against her. It became evident that she had manipulated and pressured Conrad, not out of concern for him, but seemingly for attention and sympathy. Her sudden transformation into an activist following his death further raised suspicions. Michelle Carter was ultimately charged with involuntary manslaughter. On June 16, 2017, she was found guilty and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. However, in February 2019, her sentence was reduced to just 15 months, followed by 5 years of probation. Despite her conviction, she continued to appeal her sentence, possibly citing her own mental health struggles. At the time, she had not yet served a single day in prison. Cassandra Bjork. Her name is tied to one of the most shocking and heartbreaking crimes to come out of Gwinnett County, Georgia. On April 8, 2017, Cassandra, who was 17 at the time, and her 19-year-old boyfriend Johnny Ryder, committed a crime that sent shockwaves through their community. It all started in the seemingly peaceful home of Cassandra's grandparents, Wendy and Randall Bjork, who had raised her after her parents were no longer in her life. The couple was known for being loving and caring, but that didn't stop Cassandra and Johnny from carrying out a plan, so brutal it's hard to believe. According to investigators, Cassandra and Johnny were fed up with her grandparents' rules and decided to kill them. They attacked the couple with a tire iron, a hammer, and even slit their throats. Wendy and Randall didn't stand a chance against the two teens. What's even more chilling is that after killing them, Cassandra and Johnny stayed in the house for days, hanging out, using drugs, and even inviting friends over, all while the bodies were still inside. But their violent streak didn't end there. The couple later attacked Johnny's sister and her boyfriend, leaving them with severe injuries. They lured them into a meeting under the pretense of talking things out, but it turned into a brutal assault. The victims survived and were able to alert the police, which eventually led to Cassandra and Johnny being tracked down. After the attack on Johnny's sister, Cassandra and Johnny went on the run. When police located them, it turned into an hours-long standoff at an apartment in Sewanee, Georgia. The couple barricaded themselves inside and threatened to take their own lives. They even attempted to injure themselves using knives, but were ultimately subdued and taken into custody alive. When questioned, Cassandra showed little emotion. She admitted she had been thinking about killing her grandparents for weeks and felt no remorse for her actions. In court, the horrifying details of their crimes shocked everyone. Cassandra pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder in 2019 and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Angel Gupta, also known by her birth name Shashi Prabha, is an Indian model and actress who, along with her lover Manjeet Sarawat and other accomplices, was recently sentenced to life imprisonment for the 2018 contract killing of Sarawat's wife, Sunita. The case, which concluded with convictions in April 2025 after a nearly 7-year investigation, was described by a Delhi court as a cold-blooded, well-planned criminal conspiracy. Angel Gupta met Manjeet Sarawat at a nightclub in Delhi around 2016. Their relationship developed despite Sarawat being married to Sunita, a 38-year-old primary school teacher and mother of 2. Sunita was aware of the affair and reportedly documented her anguish and fears in a personal diary, which later became crucial evidence in the investigation. Sunita refused to divorce Manjeet, becoming an obstacle to Angel and Manjeet's desire to be together. Driven by Angel's alleged obsession and Sunita's refusal to end the marriage, Angel and Manjeet hatched a plot to murder Sunita. They enlisted Angel's stepfather, Rajiv Gupta, and his driver, Deepak, to help arrange contract killers. They reportedly offered 10 Indian rupees lakh, approximately $12,000 at the time, for the deed. The conspirators meticulously planned the murder. Angel even rehearsed the attack, riding a scooter to simulate Sunita's daily commute to school. Their first attempt to kill Sunita on October 25, 2018, Karva Chauth, a significant Hindu festival, failed. However, 4 days later, on October 29, 2018, Sunita was ambushed and shot dead by 2 hired assailants near the Daryapur police post while on her way to school. The Delhi police launched a thorough investigation which relied on digital clues like bank transactions, mobile tower locations, call records, CCTV footage, and crucially, Sunita's diary. The diary provided insight into her troubled marital life and confirmed her husband's affair with Angel. Conflicting alibis from the suspects and forensic evidence from recovered vehicles and weapons also played a key role. Angel Gupta, Manjeet Sarawat, Rajiv Gupta, Deepak, and the 2 hired shooters, Vishal and Shezad Saifai, were all arrested and subsequently charged. On April 28, 2025, a Delhi court found all 6 guilty of murder and criminal conspiracy. Days later, they were all sentenced to life imprisonment. The court emphasized that Sunita was murdered solely because she stood in the way of her husband and his lover's relationship. Angel Gupta, who had aspired to a Bollywood career and had appeared in item songs and small film cameos, will now serve her life sentence in Tihar jail. Reports noted that despite the gravity of their crimes, Angel and Manjeet showed little remorse during the court proceedings. Number 10. In November 12, 2008, at Dillard High School in Florida, Tia, who was 15, was struggling with strong feelings for her friend, Amanda Collette, also 15. Amanda didn't feel the same way, which made Tia very upset. Tia was also dealing with depression and emotional problems. On that day, during a class, Tia shot Amanda in the head. Amanda died right there. This happened in front of other students, causing a lot of fear and confusion. After the shooting, Tia didn't run away. She stayed in the classroom. When police came, she gave herself up without a fight, putting the gun down. She was then taken into custody by the police. Because of the very serious crime, Tia was charged with murder. Even though she was a teenager, the law in Florida allowed her to be charged as an adult for such a serious act. In October 2009, Tia decided not to fight the charges and pleaded no contest. This means she accepted the punishment without saying if she was guilty or innocent. The judge had to decide if she should go to a juvenile center or an adult prison. In the end, the judge gave Tia an adult prison sentence of 25 years. The court considered her young age and her mental health problems, but also the terrible thing that happened to Amanda. Tia will have to spend most of those 25 years in prison before she can even be considered for release. Kelsey Nicole Turner, a former model who had worked for Playboy Italia and Maxim magazines, became widely known for her involvement in the 2019 murder of Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard, a 71-year-old child psychiatrist. The case gained significant attention due to the high-profile nature of those involved and the disturbing details of the crime. Dr. Burchard's bludgeoned body was discovered in the trunk of Turner's abandoned Mercedes-Benz coupe on a desert road outside Las Vegas in March 2019. Investigations revealed that Turner had an intimate relationship with Dr. Burchard, who had reportedly provided her with significant financial support, including paying the rent for her Las Vegas home where she lived with her then-boyfriend John Logan Kennison and a roommate, Diana Nicole Pena. The prosecution alleged that Dr. Burchard had traveled to Las Vegas intending to end his financial support for Turner, and his longtime girlfriend, Judy Earp, claimed he had given Turner around $750,000 over several years, and that Turner had continued to defraud him even after his death. According to court proceedings, Turner, Kennison, and Pena were involved in the killing. Pena testified that she witnessed Kennison striking Burchard with a baseball bat after Turner became upset about something she found on Burchard's phone. Pena also stated that Turner and Kennison initially considered taking Burchard to the hospital, but that Turner later instructed Kennison to knock Thomas out. Evidence found at the crime scene included a broken door, blood, cleaning supplies, and a baseball bat. Kelsey Turner was arrested in Stockton, California in March 2019. After a lengthy legal process, she entered an Alford plea to a charge of second-degree murder in November 2022. An Alford plea allows a defendant to plead guilty while still maintaining their innocence, acknowledging that the prosecution has enough evidence to likely secure a conviction at trial. In January 2023, Turner was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Her co-defendants also faced consequences. John Kennison pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy and was sentenced to 18 to 45 years, while Diana Nicole Pena pleaded guilty to accessory to murder and provided crucial testimony for the prosecution. Turner is currently incarcerated at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Nevada. Lorena Bobbit. On June 23, 1993, Lorena Bobbit, a 24-year-old woman with a quiet demeanor, called 911 to report an unimaginable act. She had severed her husband John Wayne Bobbit's penis while he slept. Lorena and John had been married for 5 years, but their relationship was anything but happy. Behind closed doors, their marriage was a toxic and abusive nightmare. Lorena later testified that John had physically, emotionally, and sexually abused her throughout their marriage. She described years of pain and degradation, alleging that John often forced himself on her and humiliated her with cruel comments about her appearance and worth. The breaking point came on that June night. Lorena claimed that John had come home drunk and raped her once again. Overwhelmed with rage and despair, she got out of bed, went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and returned to the bedroom. What she did next shocked the world. She severed John's penis, leaving him bleeding in agony. Then, in a daze, she fled their apartment with the severed organ. eventually throwing it out of her car window onto the side of the road. The aftermath was surreal. Police scrambled to locate the missing organ, which was eventually found and successfully reattached in a groundbreaking surgery. Meanwhile, Lorena turned herself in, setting the stage for one of the most sensational trials in U.S. history. The trial of Lorena Bobbit became a media circus, with cameras capturing every shocking detail and pundits debating her actions. The courtroom was filled with graphic testimonies about the couple's tumultuous marriage. The prosecution portrayed Lorena as a vindictive woman who acted out of jealousy and rage. But Lorena's defense told a different story, a harrowing account of abuse that pushed her to the brink of insanity. The defense argued that Lorena suffered from temporary insanity caused by years of abuse. Psychologists testified that she acted in a state of extreme emotional distress, unable to control her actions after enduring so much pain. Lorena's own testimony brought the courtroom to tears as she described the horrors of her marriage and the desperation that consumed her that night. John, meanwhile, denied the allegations of abuse, claiming he was the victim of Lorena's vindictiveness. However, his credibility was called into question as details about his behavior surfaced. Friends and neighbors testified about his temper and his treatment of Lorena, painting a picture of a deeply troubled relationship. In the end, Lorena was found not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. She was ordered to undergo a 45-day psychiatric evaluation, but faced no prison time. After her release, she largely avoided the public eye for a while. She later changed her last name back to her maiden name, Gallo, and built a quiet life in Virginia. She became a domestic violence advocate, founding Lorena's Red Wagon, a nonprofit that supports domestic abuse victims. Unlike Lorena, John actively sought the spotlight. He capitalized on his notoriety by starring in adult films like John Wayne Bobbitt, Uncut, and Frank and Penis to prove he had recovered after surgery. He faced multiple run-ins with the law, including domestic violence arrests, theft charges, and financial difficulties. Health issues. In recent years, John suffered severe foot injuries from an accident, leading to the amputation of some of his toes. Thanks for watching. If you liked it and want to see more, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our new uploads. On February 11th, 2023, 16-year-old Brianna Gay, a transgender girl, was murdered in a premeditated attack in Colchester Linear Park, Warrington, England. The perpetrators were Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, both aged 15 at the time. Their motivations were primarily sadistic, driven by a thirst for death and murder, with a secondary motive of transphobia for Ratcliffe. The pair had meticulously planned the killing for months, exchanging thousands of chilling WhatsApp messages discussing fantasies of murder and torture, and even compiling a list of potential victims before focusing on Brianna. Weeks before the fatal attack, Jenkinson had even attempted to poison Brianna with an overdose of ibuprofen, hoping her death would be mistaken for a suicidal overdose. On the day of the murder, Jenkinson lured Brianna to Colchester Linear Park, where they met Ratcliffe. The trio walked to a secluded spot, and then, in a frenzied and ferocious assault, Brianna was stabbed 28 times with a hunting knife brought by Ratcliffe, sustaining wounds to her head, neck, chest, and back. A handwritten murder plan, detailing the exact steps of the attack, was later found in Jenkinson's bedroom. The brutal murder was discovered by two dog walkers who noticed Jenkinson and Ratcliffe fleeing the scene. They found Brianna's lifeless body, face down and bleeding heavily, and immediately called emergency services. Brianna was pronounced dead at the scene shortly thereafter. Police quickly launched a murder investigation. Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe were identified as suspects through eyewitness accounts and were arrested within 24 hours of the incident. Searches of their homes yielded crucial evidence: the handwritten murder plan in Jenkinson's room and the hunting knife with traces of Brianna's blood in Ratcliffe's room. Furthermore, thousands of deleted text messages exchanged between the two, meticulously planning the attack, were recovered from their mobile phones. During initial interviews, both teenagers denied involvement and attempted to blame each other, but the overwhelming evidence, including their own communications, solidified the case against them. On December 20th, 2023, after an almost 4-week trial at Manchester Crown Court, both Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe were convicted of Brianna Gay's murder. On February 2nd, 2024, they were sentenced to life imprisonment. Jenkinson received a minimum term of 22 years before being eligible for parole, while Ratcliffe was given a minimum of 20 years, a factor that contributed to their sentences. Both teenagers showed no visible remorse during their sentencing, and the judge noted Jenkinson's history of lying and her expressed desire to kill again. Their conviction and sentencing highlighted the extreme premeditation and brutality of the crime, as well as the disturbing influence they had on each other. Kelly Cochran. It began with love and a deadly pact. Kelly Cochran and her husband, Jason Cochran, had been high school sweethearts. Together, they shared a bond that seemed unbreakable. But beneath the surface was a sinister secret. Early in their marriage, the couple made a dark promise. If either one of them ever cheated, they would kill the lover. It was a twisted vow that would lead to horrifying consequences. In 2014, Kelly began an affair with Christopher Reagan, a 53-year-old veteran and co-worker living in the quiet town of Iron River, Michigan. Chris was a kind man, known for his charm and gentle nature, but his budding romance with Kelly would seal his fate. On October 14th, 2014, Chris disappeared. He had planned to move out of town for a new job and had been packing his belongings, excited for a fresh start. But he never made it. His car was later found abandoned on a desolate road, and inside it was a sticky note with directions to Kelly's house. For years, Chris's disappearance remained a mystery. Police suspected Kelly and Jason, but lacked concrete evidence to tie them to the crime. It wasn't until 2016, when Jason Cochran was found dead in their Indiana home, that the horrifying truth began to unravel. Jason's death was ruled a heroin overdose at first, but investigators quickly realized it was no accident. Kelly admitted to injecting him with a lethal dose, claiming it was out of mercy for his failing health. But Jason's family and friends believed otherwise. They suspected Kelly killed him to keep him silent about Chris Reagan's death. The case took a shocking turn when Kelly finally confessed to Chris's murder. She revealed that on the night of October 14th, she had lured Chris to her home, where Jason was waiting. Together, they ambushed him. Jason shot in the head while Kelly watched, fulfilling their deadly pact. But the horror didn't stop there. Kelly confessed to something even more disturbing. She and Jason had dismembered Chris's body and scattered the remains in the woods. Some pieces, Kelly claimed, were kept and served at a barbecue, leading to speculation that the couple had engaged in cannibalism. In 2017, Kelly Cochran was convicted of Chris Reagan's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She later pled guilty to Jason Cochran's murder and received an additional 65-year sentence. Abigail White. Abigail is a former OnlyFans model from Kingswood, near Bristol, UK, who was convicted of murdering her ex-boyfriend, Bradley Lewis, in March 2022. The case garnered significant media attention due to her online profession and the brutal nature of the crime. On March 25, 2022, White, then 24, stabbed Bradley Lewis, 22, in the heart with a kitchen knife at their shared home minutes after they had returned from a pub. This occurred shortly after Lewis had informed her that he no longer wanted to be in a relationship with her. After the stabbing, a neighbor heard White screaming and found Lewis on the kitchen floor. White initially attempted to cover up her actions, telling her neighbor, a friend, and later the police that Lewis had stabbed himself. Evidence presented in court painted a picture of a tumultuous and violent relationship. White was described as controlling and violent by the judge. The court heard chilling voice recordings made by White prior to the murder, where she stated she had no limit when angry and believed she was quite capable of killing Lewis. She had also threatened to kill him regularly, and Lewis had confided in friends that he was scared of her. In the days leading up to the fatal incident, White had reportedly stabbed Lewis in the arm, requiring him to seek medical attention. During her trial at Bristol Crown Court, White denied murder but admitted to manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility, claiming she only intended to shock and scare Lewis with the knife. She stated she picked up the knife in anger and upset, but didn't intend to harm or kill him. However, the jury rejected her defense after a 2-week trial and found her guilty of murder in October 2022. Abigail White was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years before she would be eligible for parole. The judge emphasized her controlling and violent nature, noting her previous threats and attacks on Lewis. Samantha Wilford was born on August 28, 1989, as the eldest of 3 children. She had a relatively pleasant childhood, growing up in a loving family of 5. As a teenager, she embraced an alternative style and was deeply involved in the internet, constantly engaged with social media. At 19, while still in high school, Samantha had her first relationship, which quickly led to the birth of her first 2 children, twins. However, the relationship was short-lived, and she became a single mother with no financial stability, career, or plans for the future. A few months later, in 2008, she met Ernie Ibarra at a tattoo shop. Ernie, born on December 25, 1985, came from a caring family despite his parents' separation. He was a kind, generous man, passionate about gaming and working hard as a woodworker. Their relationship blossomed, and Ernie took financial responsibility for Samantha and her children. In 2011, Samantha and Ernie had their own set of twins, and to support their growing family, Ernie took an extra job at Little Caesars. By 2013, Samantha gave birth to their fifth and final child. However, their relationship started deteriorating due to financial and emotional stress. Samantha felt neglected due to Ernie's gaming habits, even accusing him of infidelity when his online gaming character married another player in a virtual world. In an attempt to mend their relationship, Ernie proposed to her, but their problems persisted. Samantha, craving attention, turned to YouTube under the username SimplyManic6075. She initially posted commentary videos, but later focused on frequently complaining about her relationship and children. She portrayed herself as struggling, yet she admitted to spending most of her time watching Netflix and playing games instead of taking care of her kids. Despite her lack of real success on YouTube, she became obsessed with the idea of fame, believing she was destined for stardom. As her dissatisfaction with Ernie grew, so did the toxicity in their relationship. She publicly accused Ernie of being an abusive husband and father, even reporting him to the police multiple times, though no evidence ever supported her claims. His family insisted she was lying for attention. By the end of 2014, their relationship had become unbearable, filled with constant arguments and resentment. On February 20th, 2015, Samantha's aunt made a frantic 911 call, claiming Samantha had been tied up and that intruders had taken Ernie. Samantha told police that 3 masked men dressed in black broke into their home. Ernie dragged him out and left her bound and gagged. However, inconsistencies in her story raised suspicion. The crime scene lacked evidence of forced entry, and all 5 children were unusually placed in the same room that night. When questioned, Samantha's version of events kept changing. Eventually, she named a man named Jonathan Sanford, claiming he might be involved. Jonathan, known for his violent history, had just been released from prison for assault of a family member. Along with 2 accomplices, Jose Antonio Ponce and Octavius Rhymes, Jonathan had conspired with Samantha to kill Ernie. The truth was uncovered when police analyzed Samantha's phone. During the initial investigation, she had secretly texted Octavius. When confronted, she claimed she had taken Ambien, a sleep medication, and could not remember sending the messages. Jonathan later confessed, revealing that Samantha manipulated him by claiming Ernie was abusive. Initially, the plan was to plan on Ernie to get him arrested, but they later decided it was easier to kill him. On the night of the murder, Samantha gave her children high doses of Ambien so they would sleep through the attack. She left the door unlocked, allowing the killers easy access. Ernie was kidnapped, brutally beaten, and driven to a remote wooded area in Camp County, Texas. Throughout the drive, he begged them not to hurt him or his family. Once they reached the location, Jose shot Ernie, leaving his body in the woods. With Jonathan's confession and digital evidence, all 4 suspects were arrested. Jonathan and Jose pleaded guilty to aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder, each receiving 50-year sentences. Octavius, despite pleading not guilty, was convicted and sentenced to 98 years. Samantha, the mastermind behind the plot, went to trial in 2017. Her defense of being under the influence of Ambien was not believed. She was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years for kidnapping. In a separate trial for murder, she was given an additional 99-year sentence. Jodi Arias was a beautiful, ambitious young woman who seemed to have her life ahead of her. In September 2006, she met Travis Alexander, a charismatic salesman and motivational speaker, at a conference in Las Vegas. Their connection was instant, sparking a passionate relationship filled with fiery highs and toxic lows. Travis, a devout Mormon with big dreams, had plans for success, faith, and family. Jodi, though not Mormon, converted to the faith to become closer to him. On the surface, their relationship was exciting and full of potential. But behind closed doors, it was riddled with jealousy, obsession, and emotional manipulation. By 2008, their relationship had ended, but Jodi refused to let Travis go. Despite moving to Mesa, Arizona, to be near him, Travis began distancing himself and even started dating other women. Jody, consumed with jealousy, would show up unannounced, hack into his social media accounts, and send threatening messages to the women he was seeing. Friends of Travis grew concerned, warning him that Jody's behavior was dangerous. Then came June 4th, 2008, a day that would haunt everyone who knew Travis Alexander. His body was discovered days later in his Mesa home. The crime scene was shocking. Travis had been stabbed nearly 30 times, his throat was slit from ear to ear, and he had been shot in the head. The brutal nature of the killing stunned investigators, and the evidence left little doubt that it was personal. Suspicion quickly fell on Jody. Despite her claims that she hadn't seen Travis in weeks, police uncovered damning evidence. A digital camera, found in Travis's washing machine, contained photos of the two engaging in intimate acts on the day of the murder. More chillingly, there were photos of Travis bleeding in the shower moments before his death. Jody's alibi unraveled further when her hair and handprint, mixed with Travis's blood, were found at the scene. Confronted with the evidence, Jody changed her story multiple times. First, she claimed she wasn't there. Then, she said two masked intruders killed Travis while she escaped. Finally, she admitted to killing him but claimed it was in self-defense after he attacked her in a fit of rage. The trial, which began in 2013, became a media sensation. Jody Arias captivated the public with her dramatic testimony, shifting narratives, and unflinching gaze. Prosecutor Juan Martinez painted her as a manipulative, jealous ex-girlfriend who brutally killed Travis in a premeditated act of rage. The defense argued that Jody was a victim of domestic abuse who acted out of fear for her life. The trial was filled with shocking revelations, graphic photos, explicit text messages, and Jody's testimony about their tumultuous relationship. Social media exploded with opinions, and the courtroom became a circus. True crime enthusiasts dub it one of the most gripping trials of the decade. After months of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Jody Arias guilty of first-degree murder. However, they were deadlocked on whether to sentence her to death. A second jury also failed to agree on the death penalty, and in 2015, Jody was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even in prison, Jody remains a figure of fascination. She's given interviews, maintained her innocence, and continues to claim that she acted in self-defense. In November 2009, Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham were responsible for the horrific death of 3-year-old Serenity Richardson in South Carolina. Serenity was Erica Butts' goddaughter and was in the care of the two women. Over several days, the toddler was subjected to brutal beatings, primarily for potty training accidents. The injuries were so severe they ultimately led to the child's death. They were charged with homicide by child abuse. The case proceeded to court, indicating that they were apprehended and formally charged following the discovery of the crime and the investigation. They pleaded guilty to the crime in August 2011. On Thursday, November 3rd, 2011, Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham, both 25 years old at the time, each received a life sentence without parole from a Charleston judge. This sentencing occurred exactly 2 years after Serenity Richardson's death. The prosecutor, Elizabeth Gordon, emphasized the extreme nature of their actions, stating, "It is nearly impossible for words to accurately describe what these women did to that poor little girl." Their guilty pleas in August paved the way for this definitive sentencing. On January 12, 1995, 18-year-old Christa Pike, a participant in the Job Corps program in Knoxville, Tennessee, brutally murdered 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer, a fellow classmate. Pike's motive was jealousy. She believed Slemmer was attempting to steal her boyfriend, Tatterall Shipp. Pike, along with Shipp, 17, and another friend, Shadala Peterson, 18, planned to lure Slemmer to an isolated, abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee campus. The four signed out of their dormitory together and proceeded to the secluded woods. Upon arrival, Slemmer was told they wanted to make peace by offering her marijuana. However, the situation quickly turned into a prolonged and horrific act of torture. For approximately 30 minutes, Slemmer was taunted, beaten, and slashed with a box cutter and a miniature meat cleaver by Pike and Shipp, while Peterson acted as a lookout. A pentagram was carved into Slemmer's chest while she was still alive and conscious. Finally, Pike delivered the fatal blow, smashing Slemmer's skull with a large chunk of asphalt. In a grotesque act, Pike kept a piece of Slemmer's skull as a souvenir and later showed it off around the school, boasting about the murder. The perpetrators were apprehended swiftly within 36 hours of the murder. The Job Corps dormitory's logbook proved crucial, showing that Pike, Shipp, Peterson, and Slemmer had left together, but only 3 had returned. During the investigation, detectives discovered the piece of Colleen Slemmer's skull in Christa Pike's jacket pocket, providing direct evidence of her involvement. Soon after her arrest, Pike confessed to the police about the torture and killing of Slimmer, although she initially claimed they were only trying to scare her and that the situation spiraled out of control. Her confession, combined with the physical evidence and the logbook records, solidified the case against her and her accomplices. On March 22, 1996, Christa Pike was found guilty of both first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder after only a few hours of jury deliberation. On March 30, 1996, Pike was sentenced to death by electrocution for the murder charge, making her the youngest woman to be sentenced to death in the U.S. during the post-Furman period. She also received a consecutive sentence of 25 years in prison for the conspiracy charge. Her accomplice, Tatterall Shipp, received a life sentence with the possibility of parole plus 25 years. Shadala Peterson, who had turned informant for the prosecution, pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact and received probation. Pike has since been incarcerated at the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Despite numerous appeals challenging her conviction and sentence, including arguments related to her age at the time of the crime and her troubled childhood, her death sentence has been upheld. She recently, as of September 2024, reached a settlement to end her de facto solitary confinement, allowing her more privileges and interaction with other inmates. Sabrina Krasniqi. Sabrina was a 27-year-old woman identified as a model, notably having appeared in an Inside Edition segment in 2021. In a tragic incident that occurred on November 26, 2024, in Hallandale Beach, Florida, Sabrina Krasniqi fatally shot her 34-year-old husband, Pajtem Krasniqi, multiple times before taking her own life. The couple's bodies were discovered on the balcony of their luxury high-rise condominium after police responded to a shot spotter alert indicating multiple shots. Authorities, including the Hallandale Beach Police Department, determined the event to be a murder. Pajtem Krasniqi's sister, Albana Krasniqi Munrit, expressed profound grief and shock on social media, stating that Sabrina chose to take my brother's life. She betrayed him, his love, and his trust. She shattered my family. The motive for the murder remains under investigation, though some reports suggested potential issues of adultery. The couple were Kosovar Albanian nationals with ties to New York and Kosovo, and the incident garnered headlines in both the United States and Albania. The scene of the tragedy included evidence of a violent struggle, with bullet holes in a glass door and along with personal items like a teddy bear and a box of roses found nearby. What started as a seemingly playful evening would soon spiral into one of the most bizarre and horrifying crimes in recent memory. Sarah Boone, a 42-year-old woman from Winter Park, Florida, had been in a tumultuous relationship with her boyfriend Jorge Torres Jr. Their love was marked by fiery arguments, domestic disputes, and the kind of passion that often teeters on the edge of disaster. On February 24, 2020, Sarah called 911 to report a chilling discovery. She claimed that Jorge was dead inside a suitcase. Her explanation? It was an accident, a prank gone horribly wrong. According to Sarah, the couple had been drinking heavily and playing hide and seek. At some point, Jorge climbed into a suitcase and Sarah zipped it shut as part of the game. She said she thought it would be funny, but after falling asleep and forgetting about him, she awoke the next morning to find him unresponsive. But the story she told police didn't align with the evidence investigators uncovered. The crime scene was shocking. Jorge's lifeless body was crammed into a blue suitcase in the middle of their apartment. Bruises and scratches were visible on his body, raising questions about the supposed accident. When police examined Sarah's phone, they found damning evidence that painted a much darker picture. Videos recorded on her phone that night revealed Jorge's desperate cries for help. "I can't breathe," he gasped repeatedly from inside the suitcase. Instead of helping him, Sarah can be heard laughing and mocking him. "That's what you get for choking me," she taunted, referring to an earlier argument. She even told him, "This is how it feels when you cheat on me." Her voice was cold and unfeeling as Jorge's pleas grew weaker. The videos were devastating. They showed not a prank, but a cruel and calculated act of vengeance. The playful story Sarah had told police unraveled completely, replaced by a chilling account of abuse and malice. The couple's history came into focus during the investigation. Friends and neighbors described a toxic relationship filled with fights, accusations, and frequent calls to police. Both Sarah and Jorge had a history of domestic violence, with accusations going back and forth over the years. The relationship was volatile, and many wondered if tragedy had been inevitable. Sarah Boone was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Alyssa Bustamante. The tragic events began on October 21, 2009, in the small, quiet town of St. Martins, Missouri. Alyssa's 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Olton, had no reason to be suspicious when Alyssa invited her to play. Elizabeth was a sweet, trusting child who loved spending time with friends. That night, she left home to meet Alyssa, completely unaware she would never return. Alyssa had spent days planning the murder, even going as far as digging 2 graves in the woods behind her house. That evening, she lured Elizabeth into the woods under the guise of fun, but had something far darker in mind. In an act of calculated cruelty, Alyssa strangled Elizabeth, slit her throat, and stabbed her repeatedly. The sheer brutality of the crime left even seasoned investigators horrified. What makes this case even more disturbing is what Alyssa did after the murder. Instead of panicking or showing remorse, she went home and attended a church youth group event, acting as if nothing had happened. Later that night, she wrote in her diary about the murder. Her entry read, "I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. It was amazing. Pretty enjoyable. I gotta go to church now, LOL." This chilling confession revealed not only her lack of remorse, but also the disturbing pleasure she took in committing the crime. When Elizabeth was reported missing, the community launched a massive search effort. For 2 agonizing days, volunteers and law enforcement scoured the area. Suspicion eventually fell on Alyssa due to her proximity to Elizabeth and her erratic behavior during the search. Under questioning, Alyssa eventually broke down and confessed to the murder, leading investigators to Elizabeth's shallow grave in the woods. During interviews, Alyssa's demeanor was cold and detached. She admitted to killing Elizabeth to see what it felt like. Her words were devoid of emotion, shocking everyone who heard them. Psychologists later testified that Alyssa struggled with severe depression, had a history of self-harm, and often fantasized about death. However, the calculated nature of her actions made it difficult for anyone to see her as a victim. In 2012, Alyssa was convicted of second-degree murder and armed criminal action, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole. Sharon Carr, notoriously dubbed the Devil's Daughter and believed to be the youngest female murderer in British history, committed her first known murder in June 1992, at the age of just 12 years old. Her victim was Katie Ratcliffe, an 18-year-old whom Carr stabbed 32 times. After the brutal attack, Carr stole some of Ratcliffe's jewelry. This murder initially remained unsolved for years. Carr's motivation for her crimes was chillingly attributed to gratification, stating that killing turned her on and that she believed she was born to kill. She displayed an obsession with violence from a young age and continued to exhibit highly aggressive and sexualized behavior. The breakthrough in the cold case of Katie Ratcliffe's murder came years later, stemming from Carr's continued violent tendencies. In June 1994, 2 years after Ratcliffe's murder, Carr attacked another pupil at Collingwood College Comprehensive School. Crucially, during this period, she began to boast about Katie Ratcliffe's murder, revealing details that only the killer would know. This self-incrimination led to her apprehension on June 8, 1994. Upon her arrest, Carr was sent to a medical assessment center, where her violent behavior continued as she attempted to strangle 2 staff members, leading to additional charges. She was subsequently held in various psychiatric units and young offenders institutions, but her disruptive and aggressive behavior persisted. Sharon Carr was formally convicted of Katie Ratcliffe's murder on March 25, 1997. Due to her young age at the time of the crime, she attracted significant media interest. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 14 years. Despite the expiration of this minimum tariff, Carr has remained incarcerated long after 2011, when she would have served her 14 years, due to her consistently disruptive and dangerous behavior within the prison system. She has been transferred between various facilities, including HM Prison Holloway, Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric hospital, and HM Prison Bronzefield, continually assisting staff and other inmates and expressing a desire to kill. As of August 2023, Carr has been repeatedly denied parole, still being considered a significant danger to the public. The murder of 12-year-old Shanda Renee Scherer occurred on January 11, 1992, in Madison, Indiana, a crime that garnered international attention due to its extreme brutality and the young age of the 4 teenage perpetrators: Melinda Lovelace, 16, Lori Tackett, 16, Hope Rippey, 15, and Tony Lawrence, 17. The motive for this savage act stemmed from revenge, as Melinda Lovelace harbored resentment towards Shanda for dating Lovelace's ex-girlfriend, Amanda Heverin. The 4 girls subjected Shanda to hours of torture, including beating, stabbing, ligature strangulation, SA, and criminal confinement, before ultimately immolating and burning her to death. Her body was later found by 2 brothers hunting in a field, severely burned and posed in a suggestive position, with her face and hands disfigured in an attempt to prevent identification. The investigation into Shanda's disappearance began when her father, Stephen Scherer, reported her missing after she failed to return home. Detectives used dental records to positively identify the burned body as Shanda. The crucial break in the case came from statements made by Tony Lawrence and Hope Rippey. Based on their accounts, Melinda Loveless and Lori Tackett were arrested on January 12, 1992, just a day after Shanda's body was discovered. All four girls were eventually charged as adults, facing the prospect of severe penalties, including the death penalty, which they managed to avoid by accepting plea bargains. The sentencing phase saw varied outcomes for the four girls involved. Melinda Loveless and Lori Tackett both pleaded guilty to murder, criminal confinement, and arson. They each received a sentence of 60 years in prison and were incarcerated in the Indiana Women's Prison. Tackett was released in January 2018 after serving 25 years, while Loveless, considered the ringleader, was released in September 2019 after 26 years. Hope Rippey also pleaded guilty to murder, criminal confinement, and arson, initially receiving a 60-year sentence that was later reduced on appeal to 35 years in prison. She was paroled after 14 years in 2006. Finally, Toni Lawrence, in exchange for her cooperation, pleaded guilty to one count of criminal confinement and was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years in prison, being paroled after 9 years in 2000. Tara Lambert. Tara is an American woman, formerly described as a fashion model, who gained notoriety for her involvement in a murder-for-hire plot in Ohio. Her case was particularly complex due to legal challenges and her defense's arguments about her mental state. In 2015, Tara Lambert, then 33, attempted to hire a hitman to kill Kelly Cook, who was the mother of her husband's two teenage daughters. The plot stemmed from ongoing disputes over visitation and custody. Lambert met with an undercover deputy sheriff posing as a hitman. During their recorded conversations, Lambert allegedly suggested gruesome ways to dispose of Cook's body, including throwing her into a lumber shredder or wood chipper. She provided the undercover officer with a photo of Cook, her address, information about her vehicles, and a down payment of $125. Lambert was arrested in July 2015. In January 2016, a jury in Circleville, Ohio, found her guilty of one count of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder. She was acquitted of a second count alleging she also tried to have Cook's new husband killed. Lambert's defense argued that she was only kidding about her statements and that she was developmentally damaged, drank excessively, and used prescription drugs. She was initially sentenced to 7 years in prison in February 2016. In 2017, an appeals court overturned Lambert's conviction. The reason for the reversal was a paperwork error or a fatal flaw in the language of her original indictment. The appeals judge ruled that the prosecution failed to state a specific overt act that Lambert committed to further the conspiracy, as required by law. This legal technicality meant she was freed from prison in June 2017, after serving about a year. Despite the overturned conviction, prosecutors quickly moved to re-indict Lambert on new charges of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, correcting the previous errors. In July 2018, Tara Lambert, who by then had begun using her maiden name, Arbogast, pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder. She expressed remorse in court, stating, "I am truly sorry for the harm that my actions have caused. I never intended for the situation to get so out of control, but it did, and I do accept full responsibility." Following her second plea, Lambert was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with credit for time already served. State detention records indicated she was slated for release in March 2022. The disturbing case known as the Slender Man stabbing involved two 12-year-old girls, Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser, and their attempt to commit murder on May 31st, 2014, in Waukesha, Wisconsin. The crime was meticulously planned and shockingly brutal, rooted in the girls' belief in the fictional internet boogeyman, Slender Man. Their primary motive was to become proxies of Slender Man, a mythical figure they believed would harm their families if they didn't commit a sacrifice. They lured their friend and classmate, Peyton Lutner, into a wooded area after a sleepover, under the guise of playing hide and seek. It was there that Geyser, encouraged by Weier, repeatedly stabbed Lutner with a kitchen knife a total of 19 times, aiming for her vital organs. Despite her severe injuries, including stab wounds that narrowly missed major arteries, Lutner bravely managed to crawl out of the woods and was eventually found by a passing cyclist, who immediately called for help, saving her life. The arrest of Weier and Geyser occurred remarkably quickly, just 5 hours after the attack. They were found walking alongside Interstate 94, attempting to reach Slender Man's supposed mansion in the Nicolet National Forest. During their subsequent interrogations, the contrasting reactions of the two girls became evident. Weier reportedly showed signs of guilt and remorse, while Geyser displayed a chilling lack of emotion and empathy, maintaining her belief in Slender Man due to the severity and premeditated nature of the crime. Both girls, despite their young age, were charged as adults with attempted first-degree intentional homicide. This decision sparked considerable public debate about the culpability of minors, particularly those with apparent mental health issues. The legal proceedings were protracted, with significant focus on the girls' mental states. Both Wire and Geyser ultimately entered pleas of not guilty by reason of mental disease, or defect. In December 2017, after separate trials, a jury found Anissa Wire to be mentally ill at the time of the crime. She was subsequently sentenced to 25 years to life in a mental health institution, a disposition that provided for long-term mental health treatment rather than traditional incarceration. Wire was later granted conditional release in September 2021, with strict monitoring and mental health requirements. Morgan Geyser, diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia, also pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide, but was found to be mentally ill. In February 2018, she received a more extensive sentence of 40 years to life in a mental health institution. Her release is projected for 2025, also under strict conditions related to her ongoing mental health treatment. Nanette and Johnston, also known by her name Nanette Packard McNeil, is a central figure in a notorious cold case murder from Newport Beach, California, that remained unsolved for 15 years. She was convicted of arranging the 1994 murder of her millionaire live-in boyfriend, William Bill McLaughlin, for financial gain. Background and motive. Johnston, a young divorced mother of two, met the much older McLaughlin, a wealthy healthcare entrepreneur, after placing a magazine ad seeking the companionship of a wealthy man. She moved into his lavish Newport Beach home, and he provided her with a generous allowance and a luxurious lifestyle. McLaughlin also made her a beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy and intended to provide further financial support in his will. However, while living with McLaughlin, Johnston was secretly involved in a romantic relationship with Eric Naposki, a former NFL linebacker who worked as a nightclub bouncer. Prosecutors alleged that Johnston was embezzling significant sums of money from McLaughlin, reportedly close to $500,000, and that she conspired with Naposki to kill McLaughlin before he discovered her theft. She stood to gain substantially from his death through life insurance and other assets. On December 15, 1994, Bill McLaughlin was shot 6 times in his Newport Beach home. His son, who was upstairs at the time, found his murdered father and called 911. Prosecutors accused Johnston of giving Naposki a key to McLaughlin's home and providing him with information about McLaughlin's schedule to facilitate the murder. Authorities suspected Johnston and Naposki early on, but the case went cold due to a lack of sufficient evidence. Johnston was, however, charged with grand theft in 1995 for embezzling from McLaughlin and served time in jail for that crime. 15 years later, in 2009, new evidence emerged, and both Nanette Johnston, then known as Nanette Packard McNeil, and Eric Naposki were charged with McLaughlin's murder. The cold case reinvestigation involved a meticulous review of original evidence and new investigative techniques. Eric Naposki was tried first and convicted of first-degree murder in July 2011, receiving a sentence of life imprisonment without parole. Nanette Johnston's trial followed in January 2012. An Orange County jury found her guilty of first-degree murder, with a special circumstance allegation that the murder was committed for financial gain. This finding meant she also faced a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without parole. She was sentenced in May 2012. Nanette Johnston Packard McNeil is currently serving her life sentence without the possibility of parole in a California state prison. Majka Kukakova, a Slovakian swimwear model, was convicted of the murder of her millionaire British ex-boyfriend, Andrew Bush, in 2016. The high-profile case unfolded in Spain, where Bush was fatally shot at his luxury villa on the Costa del Sol. The incident occurred in April 2014. Majka, then 26, had traveled to Bush's home near Marbella, reportedly to collect her belongings after their 2.5-year relationship had ended about 6 months prior. Bush, 48, a successful jewelry businessman, unexpectedly returned to his villa from a trip to the UK with his new girlfriend, Russian student Maria Korateva. According to court proceedings, a confrontation ensued. Majka claimed that Bush became violent and that she shot him in self-defense, stating she never meant to hurt him and that the gun just went off during a struggle. However, prosecutors and the jury found her account to be false. Evidence presented showed that Majka shot Bush 3 times, once in the arm and twice in the head, with the final shot to the head being fatal. Bush's new girlfriend, Maria Korateva, who was waiting in Bush's Hummer outside, testified that she heard shots and that Majka later emerged, telling her to get out of the car before fleeing in it. Kukakova fled the scene in Bush's Hummer and eventually turned herself into Slovakian authorities days later. She was then extradited to Spain to face charges. In May 2016, a Spanish court in Malaga found Majka Kukakova guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the murder and an additional 6 months for breaking into Bush's home. The court also ordered her to pay 200,000 euros to Bush's daughter and sister as compensation. In February 2017, her sentence was reportedly reduced to 13 years by Spanish courts. Media reports in October 2022 indicated she was spotted enjoying the sun in Spain, having been released early on parole, causing outrage among Bush's family. On February 9, 2004, Stephen Schulhoff, the father of 16-year-old Courtney Schulhoff, was brutally bludgeoned to death in his Altamonte Springs, Florida apartment. The weapon used was a Louisville Slugger baseball bat. The murder was orchestrated by Courtney Schulhoff and carried out by her 20-year-old boyfriend, Michael Morin. Courtney and Morin had been in a relationship for about a year, and it was reportedly a tumultuous one, with Morin being on probation for car theft. The exact sequence of events during the murder was disputed by the two perpetrators, with each attempting to shift blame. Schulhoff initially claimed Morin acted alone while she was walking her father's dog, and that he threatened her after the fact. However, in a second interview with police, she admitted that she had intentionally left the baseball bat by the bedroom door for Morin to use, and waited outside at the apartment's tennis court area while he killed her father. Morin, on his part, claimed that Schulhoff had pressured him to kill her father, whom she allegedly hated, and that he blacked out during the attack, only regaining lucidity afterward. After the murder, Schulhoff and Morin reportedly drove to a McDonald's 20 miles away in Orlando using Stephen Schulhoff's truck, and later returned to the apartment, allegedly planning to dispose of the body by throwing it off a bridge in Brevard County. The arrests of Courtney Schulhoff and Michael Morin occurred on February 11, 2004, 2 days after the murder. The crucial tip came from Stephen Schulhoff's girlfriend, Elaine Bauk, who arrived at the apartment to check on Stephen and observe Courtney and Michael fleeing the scene. She immediately called 911, leading to their swift apprehension. Both were charged in connection with Stephen Schulhoff's death, though due to her age, Courtney Schulhoff was ineligible for the death penalty. Courtney Schulhoff was the first to stand trial, with proceedings beginning on September 26, 2006. Prosecutors argued that while Michael Morin committed the act, Schulhoff had orchestrated the murder. She did not testify in her own defense during this initial trial, and on September 27, 2006, she was found guilty of first-degree murder. Given her age at the time of the crime, 16, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, in March 2017, her sentence was reduced to 40 years following an appeal. Michael Morin's trial began in April 2007, where he admitted to killing Stephen Schulhoff but expressed regret. Interestingly, during Morin's trial, Schulhoff provided a new deposition, claiming she was the one who had bludgeoned her father to death. Despite this, Michael Morin was also convicted on April 26, 2007, and sentenced to life in prison without parole, and is currently serving his sentence at the Taylor Correctional Institution. February 22, 2021, 911 dispatchers received a call from a hysterical teenage girl. Officers arrived quickly and were greeted by the caller, 14-year-old Claire Miller, on her own front porch. She was waving down the officers as they arrived, covered in blood. All she kept saying to the police over and over again was, "I my sister." Officers looked around Claire and saw blood in the snow. It dawned on them that Claire had tried to use the frozen water in a desperate attempt to clean the blood off her hands. She lived with her parents, Mark and Marie Elena Miller, as well as her 19-year-old older sister, Helen. Helen Miller, the victim, was disabled and had cerebral palsy, a movement disorder that typically manifests in early childhood. Due to her disability, Helen used a wheelchair to get around. Helen was a caring person with a great sense of humor. She was also an artist who enjoyed painting and sculpting. One of her watercolor pieces even won an award at one point. By all accounts, she was talented and kind. Despite the horror of what Claire eventually did, there are reports that she and Helen actually had a good relationship. Claire often accompanied Helen to hospital visits and was there for her during difficult times, particularly when Helen struggled with the realities of her disability. On February 21st, 2021, just hours before the crime, Claire posted a TikTok. The post itself was not related to the crime in any way, but it is chilling to think that she was in a state of mind where she was able to post on social media just before committing such a brutal act. A witness, who was allegedly a friend of Claire's, later came forward and claimed that Claire had spoken to them that day, expressing what they described as homicidal thoughts. In the early morning hours of February 22nd, while the rest of her family was sound asleep, Claire retrieved a large kitchen knife. She then walked into Helen's room and began stabbing her sister. Helen suffered multiple stab wounds. After the attack, Claire covered Helen's face with a pillow, except the knife was still embedded in her neck. The reason for this is unknown. Claire then called 911, leading to the frantic call we mentioned at the beginning. When the police arrived, they found Claire outside, attempting to clean her hands with snow. At that point, as far as we know, her parents were still asleep, completely unaware of the horror that had just occurred. Claire willingly led the police to Helen's room. It is unclear when her parents woke up, but they likely did so when law enforcement entered their home. The police attempted to revive Helen, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead at 4:13 a.m. As news of the crime spread, people flocked to TikTok to search for Claire's account. Claire, under the alleged username Spirit Sansa Consulting, had been fairly active on the platform, amassing around 22,000 followers before the murder. Her content was typical of a teenage girl: anime-themed videos, popular trends, and lip-syncing clips. After news of the crime broke, she gained an additional 11,000 followers, bringing her total to more than 30,000. Helen even appeared in the background of some of these clips, one of the only glimpses we have of her life before it was cut short. Claire was arrested and charged with murder. In Pennsylvania, any minor charged with murder is automatically tried as an adult, which is why her name was publicly released. Her defense attorney, Robert Byer, is attempting to have the case moved to juvenile court. If successful, Claire would be placed in a juvenile detention center where she could receive rehabilitation services, including psychiatric care. Her legal team is also pursuing an insanity defense. However, if Claire is tried as an adult and the insanity defense fails, she could face life in prison or even the death penalty. Michaela Brashai Rylarsdom, a 31-year-old OnlyFans model, was charged with second-degree murder in February 2025 in connection with the death of 55-year-old Michael Dale in April 2023. The incident occurred during a paid BDSM fetish encounter at Dale's home in Escondido, California. According to court documents and police affidavits, Dale had hired Rylarsdom for $11,000 to engage in various fetish acts, including being wrapped like a mummy in saran wrap and duct tape, having women's boots glued to his feet, and adhesive poured onto his eyes. The investigation revealed that during the 4-hour encounter on April 17, 2023, Dale died from asphyxiation after a plastic bag was placed over his head and secured with duct tape and additional saran wrap. The medical examiner determined the bag was on his head for at least 8 minutes, ruling the death a homicide. Crucially, prosecutors alleged that Rylarsdom continued to film content for her OnlyFans page while Dale was suffocating on the floor. A video recovered from her phone reportedly shows Dale struggling to breathe with the bag over his head, while Rylarsdom performed acts nearby. When Rylarsdom eventually called 911, she was found by police attempting CPR on an unresponsive Dale. He was declared brain dead at a hospital the following day and later removed from life support. Rylarsdom told police it was her first time engaging in fetish behavior and denied placing or securing the bag over Dale's head. Her defense attorney has stated that there was no intent to kill and that consent was involved, though acknowledging consent is not a defense for murder. She has pleaded not guilty to the charge and is being held without bail in a San Diego County jail, awaiting trial. Christine Paulilla, a 17-year-old student at Clear Lake High School in Clear Lake City, Texas, was voted Miss Irresistible by her classmates. However, that same year marked a dark turn when she became involved in a quadruple murder. On July 18, 2003, Christine and her boyfriend, Christopher Snyder, visited their friends Marcus Priscilla, Tiffany Rowell, Adalbert Sanchez, and Rachel Coloradis in Clear Lake City with the intent to steal their drugs. Tragically, an argument erupted, leading to the deaths of all 4 victims, who were shot and beaten. Initially, Christine and Christopher evaded capture, leaving the police without any leads or evidence in Clear Lake City. The families of the victims actively participated in the police investigation in Clear Lake City by creating and distributing flyers, sending out mass mailings, and conducting door-to-door inquiries. Their efforts resulted in raising over $100,000 as a reward for information related to the case in Clear Lake City. Additionally, some individuals collaborated with the police to release composite sketches of the suspects, which were displayed on billboards throughout Houston. Several years passed before an anonymous tip provided crucial details about the crime, including the names of Christine and Christopher. Before an arrest could be made, Christopher Snyder died by suicide. Christine was eventually apprehended at a hotel in San Antonio, Texas, where she had been hiding for months and struggling with heroin addiction. Ultimately, she was convicted on 4 counts of murder and received a life sentence. She will be eligible for parole in 2046 at the age of 60. On March 1st, 2008, in Alba, Texas, 16-year-old Erin Caffey orchestrated the murders of her entire family. The catalyst for this horrific act was her parents' disapproval of her relationship with an older man and their attempts to prevent her from seeing him. Instead of ending the relationship, Erin and her boyfriend plotted the deaths of her family. The boyfriend, accompanied by an accomplice, invaded the Caffey residence and shot Erin's father, who survived the attack, her mother, and one of her younger brothers. Tragically, another younger brother was stabbed to death. Following the murders, the 2 men set the family's house ablaze. Initially, Erin fabricated a kidnapping story as an alibi, but her deception quickly unraveled. Due to her involvement in planning these heinous crimes in Alba, Texas, Erin Caffey was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Danielle Ioka. Danielle Ioka, known online as Mystic X Lipstick, shocked her devoted followers and the broader community in 2024. As a prominent astrology influencer and self-proclaimed spiritual healer, Danielle had built a significant social media following through her astrological insights and spiritual guidance. However, beneath the surface of her public persona, a devastating mental health crisis would unfold, ending in a horrifying sequence of events. On April 23, 2024, in Los Angeles, California, Danielle Ioka committed an unthinkable act. According to reports, she stabbed her boyfriend, killing him in their home, before fleeing with her 2 young children in her car. As she drove on the 405 freeway, Danielle pushed both children out of the moving vehicle. Following this, sped up her car, then ran into a tree, taking her own life. Miraculously, her 9-year-old daughter survived the ordeal, but her 8-month daughter didn't. The entire sequence of events left the community in shock, and investigators scrambled to understand what had driven Danielle to such a catastrophic breaking point. Danielle Ioka had become well known in the astrology community for her social media presence under the handle Mystic X Lipstick. Her platform featured detailed astrological analyses, spiritual advice, and reflections on cosmic events like eclipses and planetary alignments. She presented herself as an insightful, confident healer, and her followers admired her for her charisma and depth of knowledge. Danielle's ability to interpret astrological phenomena and apply them to everyday life gained her a devoted audience. However, some of her posts hinted at deeper struggles, particularly as she began discussing apocalyptic themes tied to recent celestial events. In the days leading up to the crime, Danielle had posted about the upcoming solar eclipse, expressing concerns about its astrological implications. Her post took a dark turn, with her suggesting that the eclipse was a harbinger of doom or an end-of-days event. Investigators later theorized that Danielle may have experienced a severe mental health crisis, potentially exacerbated by her spiritual beliefs about the eclipse.